Hello, everyone. My name is Alessandro, co-founder and CEO at MetrikFlow, and it's a pleasure presenting you tonight how we are empowering retail companies in the sustainability transition. So what's the market situation? At the moment, climate change is one of the biggest challenges that our society is facing, and retail alone contributes to 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. Once you look into these emissions and you break it down, you realize that over 90% of these actually arise from scope 3 emissions. These are indirect emissions of companies coming from their supply chains. So mainly about the production of their products, transportation, and use of resources and end of life. Why is it relevant at the moment? Well, new regulations are actually targeting these scope 3 emissions to kind of unveil how we actually can achieve decarbonization. And in Europe alone, 50,000 companies will be affected next year, and they're actually not ready for change. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the regulations coming up. This year was the first one for Germany and France with a GEC and a Supply Chain Act. Next year, it's CSRD, and we have a few more coming that are actually targeting carbon tax and product environmental footprints. Some of the requirements that these companies have to face next year is around disclosing and measuring scope 3 emissions, which is the first time sustainability reporting attached to their financial statements, and setting targets to actually reduce these emissions. And part of the regulatories actually address biodiversity, not only carbon accounting. So it's a much broader aspect around environment. What are the problems that companies are facing with compliance? It's mainly around expertise, processes, and data. First of all, over 3/4 of companies does not measure the impact of their supply chains. They don't have the data, or they don't process the data on the actual impact of their suppliers and transportations. Second aspect, the processes are very time consuming. So currently companies have very big Excel files, a lot of data collected manually, and actually also finding emission factors on a manual level, which leads to about 44% average error in measurements. Finally, most companies have a one-person sustainability department or no sustainability department at all. So next year, they actually have many difficulties meeting the increasing requirements. And that's where MetrikFlow comes in, a software as a service solution that enables companies to comply with sustainability regulation and supports the role of sustainability manager, making it easier to do data collection, calculations using automation and reliable data sets, also for reporting, and develop the overall environmental strategy going beyond CO2 emissions and actually including the full spectrum of resources, for instance, water, energy, and fossil fuels. We work on a first step basis. We start with measurement, then we deep dive into analysis on a product and supply chain level, and then we use AI to actually provide reduction scenario modeling. So analyzing how different materials, different suppliers, practices actually affect the overall footprint and impact of the company. And finally, we automate reporting for different standards, whether it's the European Union with the CSRD or the UK and the US with different legislations. Our product is an end-to-end platform targeted for purchasing or sustainability managers and facilitates all the reporting aspects. We start with the company carbon footprint across scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. We deep dive in product environmental footprint to actually get very specific data on a product level. And then we connect sustainability reporting and decarbonization action. In terms of market size, the market is growing very fast, double digit expected for the next 6 years. Already today is about 15 billion opportunity. If we take into account the retail market, this is about 15% of the whole. So 2 billion today, expected to more than double in the next 5 years. And this does not consider the market that will be created by the new regulation, which for the big players is mainly taken by large consulting companies, but we have so many companies in between that actually are looking for resources and potentially doing this process in-house.
1 minute warning.
In terms of business model, it's a yearly subscription, typical SaaS. We also have fees in terms of onboarding and consulting, as many companies actually need support in this transition. And we have the pricing based on company size. In terms of go-to-market, we're starting off from the fashion industry. That's where I have a lot of expertise and I built my previous venture. And then we'll expand into food and other retail because there are a lot of synergies in terms of data sets and supply chains. And in Europe alone, the target market is about 17,500 companies. In terms of market landscape, we differentiate from carbon accounting players by taking the full spectrum of resources that a company utilize. And compared to other players that do product environmental footprint, we actually developed a solution that is fully compliant with all the different aspects. So that
time is up.
Only needs one player for this.
What are you guys looking for?
We're currently opening our pre-seed round. We already have a fourth of that complete. We're raising 500K to accelerate our go-to-market and product development. We just launched at the end of January. I have currently 2 pilot projects, one just converted, and I have a few clients in the waitlist.
And of course, folks, none of this is solicitation. If you decide to reach out, you're doing it of your own. None of it's investment advice, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. Tina, do you want to go first this time? What questions you got for Alessandro?
Yeah, Alessandro, thanks for the presentation. I found this market to be extraordinarily crowded, and there's so many companies doing carbon accounting of some sort, and it's so crowded so that each of them is trying to diversify, differentiate it. Some would tie it with the carbon credit marketplace to really mitigate. Some would generate the potential method to reduce the carbon footprint. And it is hard to grow because it's hard for the consumer to evaluate different players as well. So how do you think you can be the it company and then become really, really big? How do you go to market?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Tina. Thank you. So what we've seen in the past, starting from 2016, was the rise of sector agnostic carbon accounting players because they only had to report scope 1 and scope 2. Now that scope 3 is coming into place, we see the rise of vertical players. So you have specific players that focus in one industry because you really need to be an expert in a sector to provide, let's say, useful recommendations. We have a lot of expertise in fashion. That's why we're starting from that industry. We also have a good network in that space. And the materials and the processes itself, it's a very complicated market. So we're quite sure that a sector agnostic player won't be able to develop many different industries at the same time. So our goal is to become the leader for fashion and then expand into other areas across retail and using distribution partners such as consulting companies that have already a lot of demand for these services and currently are still doing it manually. So actually helping them increase their profit margins by implementing software and for us getting a good sales distribution in place.
What is the SAM if you are focused just on the fashion industry?
If we look at fashion industry, it's about 4,000 companies in Europe alone. If we take food and retail, then it becomes 17,500. If you take the US, this number probably more than doubles.
4,000 companies in Europe for fashion industry, how much the revenue potential for that?
Over 40 million. The revenue potential for the company?
Yeah, for you.
So we calculate about 20 to 25,000 as average ticket size for the companies. So 4,000 of that, that's about 8 million.
Okay, and
80 million, sorry, 80 million.
80 million, so small, yeah. Thank you.
So I've got a few questions. So first, I echo the sentiment of Tina. I've also met really plenty of players, upcoming players, incumbents in this space. Some try to differentiate by going to different industries. Some try to differentiate by having, for example, some parts of the platform more automatic, or having some AI somewhere in there, or stuff like that. So apart from your industry focus on fashion, are there any key technological differentiators, maybe some ways in which you do scope 3, or is the standard manual data input process And second question I have is regarding your pricing. So I saw from the slide on your page deck that you're offering different price tiers. So the first one is $6,000. The next one is $25,000. The third one I don't remember. But overall, compared to some of the other kind of similar startups to you that I've seen, is actually quite a high pricing point. So again, linking it to the first question, do you offer something extra to be able to also extract this pricing, or have you kind of not tested your pricing yet?
No. Yeah, so we have tested the pricing with the pilot projects we have at the moment. Also, you have a very big gap in the market because you have the companies that target SMEs, and they're doing really a kind of a price war. You see prices also below 1,000 for the year, but these are not very specific kind of companies, and usually only target scope 1, scope 2 for the emissions. We offer a much more comprehensive platform for sustainability managers. So we also facilitate within the platform all the collaborations that they have with other departments to collect the data. And we have a big layer of automation. So once they could link their ERP systems, we built a model to actually make smart assumptions based on where they have gaps in their data. So this is an example for product environmental footprint for fashion. According to the regulation, you would need to collect about 160 data points for one single product of production. We can already process products that only have 3 to 4 data points because we have many default data sets already assigned to that based on the material or the country or a specific, let's say, process that a material goes through. So we actually make all these aspects of data collection much, much easier for the companies. And it also results in higher accuracy when you do an assumption. Most companies that do scope 3 use a spend-based methodology, which means they assign an emission factor based on every euro spent in a category. But if you work this way, it becomes very difficult to actually act and reduce the emissions because you don't really know which materials or processes you're going through. And this is the more complex side of things. This is also one challenge that we're facing by going to clients. But coming back to the pricing aspect, big consulting companies are charging 200 to 4,000 a year for the service, which pretty much also is all externalized, and then we'll need employees in the company to actually implement it. So in terms of pricing, I think it's fair with the clients we talked to about.
Thank you.
Alessandro, I was wondering, so I also agree with my colleagues. I see a lot of different solutions out of the point of view of the customers. And I have like a carbon accounting tool, maybe a supplier selection tool, and now I need another tool for getting my ESG reports in place. So how do you think this landscape will develop? Because I can't see a world where, you know, at some point it's probably integrated in for the big ones.
SAP, yeah.
Exactly. Then there's still the smaller players, but they don't want to have 10 different tools for different type of sustainability topics. Where does it go?
No, you're completely right. One client we're talking to at the moment, they're using 3 different providers just to cover all the ESG aspect. And they told us that they look in the future to actually have only one platform. So this is also one aspect that we thought through in the platform. So also being able to integrate social and governance with as pillars to then do the sustainability reporting, because many of these people do not like to have to get acquainted to many different softwares, and also many times they're not connected one another, so you need to input the same data maybe 2-3 times. I believe there will be a player that is able to integrate the others. I think probably we will have lots of vertical players that then will be consolidated under a bigger tech company so that can provide these different services. And we're also seeing a big trend of consulting companies acquiring software to facilitate their work and also acquire all the data they already collected.
Thank you. I guess that on your product development journey, the integration with those other tools is an integral part as well, right? That you just like pull the data and then
APIs are definitely a big layer of automation that is coming in.
Yeah. So how do you bridge the gap between reporting and actually changing things? Because that's often a big issue, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of the reporting includes how the companies plan to reduce their emissions. And for retail, especially, the big lever is category 1 of scope 3 emissions, which is all the purchased goods and raw materials. So if we think about a supermarket or a fashion retailer, they do not really have control, or at least they don't know yet what's the impact of everything they're buying. From next year, they will actually have a better overview. So what we're seeing is, for instance, this big retailer in Germany is now scoring all the suppliers based on their sustainability practices, and then is going to prioritize the one with better opportunities. So we're pretty much giving this tool to any kind of retailer or fashion company, retail company, to then also being able to choose better suppliers or better partners.
But there's so many people that are also giving up very similar tools. That's my big challenge with the ESG reporting tools is the suppliers are doing this for primarily one of 2 or 3 reasons. 1, they're regulated and they have to. 2, they want to be able to have green PR and kind of wash that in front of folks. And 3, maybe to save costs, or more likely because they have to. So like, why do they choose you? And if it is that, then aren't they just going to choose the cheapest ESG solution that gets the job done?
Mm-hmm. I believe by specializing in fashion, we're seeing clients that come to us because they see our expertise and they can actually do a better job than a sector agnostic. So I think it's going to be really important to provide the best solution with also the best data access and integrations to then roll on into new markets. I believe cost won't be a big factor because these are big companies with big margins. It won't change a lot to spend 10 or 40,000 on a tool if this 30,000 is worth by a better product, which actually helps them save compliance costs, and in the future with the carbon tax actually help them reduce financial costs. So I believe the key competitive is around automation and UX UI of the product.
Probably also supplier specific or fashion and fabric specific kind of knowledge. So you can't necessarily replace one fabric with another fabric and get the same type of performance and results.
We started in fashion. My first venture is a marketplace for sustainable fashion. We actually have over 250 partners, and we evaluated the sustainability of over 400 companies. So over the last 5 years, we actually saw companies really struggling to quantify their environmental impact, and definitely bringing a lot of knowledge from that experience. And that's why we're specializing on this vertical.
I mean, can you just give it for free to all the companies on your platform? And then once the law comes into place that they have to report on ESG, just turn off the free part and have them pay?
That's a good idea.
So how do you think the ESG reporting market will develop, either in fashion where you specialize in or overall? Because I guess you have plans to enter retail, meaning other platforms will have plans to enter fashion, even if they don't know what they're doing right now. They will start knowing what they're going to be doing soon. So do you see kind of a lot of local champions, kind of countrywide, region-wide, winning kind of different platforms being used by SMEs and corporates, or do you see kind of a few big winners in the market being consolidated?
Well, that's a good question. I think I see a lot of SMEs that are not required by regulations to have very broad solutions that are going to go kind of for cheap because they do not need to follow the complexity of larger companies. And then we will see more specialized. I think we will see vertical players. Right now, there's definitely also a country component. So we're seeing certain companies, for instance, in Germany, different to Italy. So I feel like the timing and the go-to-market is definitely a good aspect. We're targeting fashion also because many people know each other. So once you have a few of the big clients, it's much easier to win the others over. And there's a big presence in Europe across Italy and France. So like if you target, let's say, all the big productions in France and Italy, then you probably have the majority of the players there.